Chaim Fear is here, and you're here, and Dave Zalt is here.
Okay.
So we are ready to start. Yesterday we learned all about dates. So we learned about dates yesterday. The dates are very healthy. They relieve constipation, and even though they're sweet, they don't cause you to get addicted. They're not addictive, like Lay's potato chips are. And we also learned that an almana gets only almana for ksuba and not masayim. A basula gets masayim. However, there's an exception to that rule, that an almana from Eirsin, if she only was mikudeshes and she never had nesuin, so not only didn't she have bia, she didn't even come into a relationship where a bia was possible, she still gets masayim. She's treated like a basula. So now the Gemara, the Mishnah takes us to a different case. Hagiyaris, a woman who became Hagiyaris, Vashvuya, or a woman who was in captivity, Vashivcha, Sheniftu, V'nishgaru, V'shenishgaru, V'shenishtachu, B'chusais, Nibenoish, Shalosh, Shalom, V'yemachon. If the Giyaris became Jewish before she was 3 years old, or if someone was captured, but they were returned before they were 3 years old, or a shivcha that was nifta before 3 years old. And what's unique about 3-year-old is a woman who's less than 3-year-old, even if she was novellas, she still remains a basula, because we learned it's kenoisen etz ayin. It's like someone pokes his eye with his finger. His eye will tear, not tear, but tear. He will have tears come out of his eyes. Yet if he does it again, it's going to tear again, because the tears that were released from the first eye poke doesn't stop the eye from tearing again. So too with basulim, even if there was a bia before someone was 3 years old, they still have their basulim. So therefore, if they became a giyorish or sheniftu v'shenishtachu before 3 years old, we consider them a basula, and therefore ksubas and masayim. They still have a ksubah of masayim, and v'yesh from tanis basulim. And the husband can expect that they're basulim, and if they find that they're not, then they can have a tanis basulim like any other basula. Amar Puna said, Ger katan. What if you have a ger who is a katan? So he doesn't have his own das to be makabel gers. Matpilanoisoi al das bezdin. Bezdin to be matpilim. Rashi says, Ein loy av. He doesn't have a father. The imoy have a yoseli askire, and his mother took him to be megayer. Matbilin. The ein loch ger beloy milu tefillah. They have to do milu tefillah, but if he does Rashi al das bezdin, which means shloisha yehu b'tfilasai, there'll be 3 dayanim by the tefillah. They didn't call tefillas ger, like any tefillah, even an adult ger. So trich and gimel. But in this case, where there's a cotton, the bezdin takes on an additional function to just being the bezdin, but they're also like his father. They nasan loy av, and therefore varehu ger al yudayan and umagoy b'yayin kosher. What's a litmus test as to whether or not something that either are goy? If the wine that he touches is kosher, and the wine that such a child touches will be kosher, because we consider his geiros to be valid. My kamash malon, what is the chiddush? The schusuloi, the zachan adam shloi b'fana, that it's good for someone to become Jewish, and you could make a schus for someone, even though they don't know about it, or even though it's kotnas no das, you could still be zoiche in Yiddishkeit for him. I don't need Rav Huna to tell me that. Tanina, I know it from a brisa, where it says befair sachin adam shloi b'fana, but the inchavan adam shloi b'fana. But something that's a chayiv, there you need to be nismana as a shliach. So Dr. Gemara, from this brisa alone, you wouldn't have known by a ger katan. Because a ma'ad tema, oivid kechavim b'fker nichalei. Maybe the guy likes to have care of being able to do nus. And it's not a zchus to be a guy or somebody. It's a chayiv, because you're taking away his access to have cares. The kaim alon, because we know the eved, an eved vada b'fker nichalei. So for an eved, it's to sure a chayiv to be mishacher an eved. So maybe a cotton, a sheigetel, a kleine sheigetel, maybe it's bad for him to become Jewish. Kamash along, they know. The Hanamini Godel, a Godel, an adult, the Tom Tami Di Surah, he's already tasted Isser, he already has a type of his nose. That's a person who is a chayfa. Aval cotton chusaloi, but a cotton that was never toim tam chet, for him it's a schos, and therefore Bezdin could be mizak him with Yiddishkeit. Let's see Rashi. Mao de tema of the chum befker nichaloi, the chayfuloi, and the ein adam nasa shliach la adam lechayvatzoi shalei b'fanav kolim shalom idaitoi. You can't do a transaction that's detrimental to somebody without their specific das and their memani shliach. The cotton labardeu. The agabe have it come out kaimelon the per kamen to get divided befker nichaloi. He for sure likes to have keres. In other words, noyach loy liyos eved. He'd rather remain an eved. Be a mutter behefker. He'd be mutter in the hefker of what? Of zimas hashvachos. He'd rather have access to those news with all the shvachos, miyosh ben chayin liyosh mutter b'vas Yisrael, rather than becoming a ben chayin and even being mutter in the bas Yisrael. L'lazilalei, l'shchichalei, l'hefker, where he once he's a ben chayin, he's not allowed to be mafker anymore. So that's not good for him. He'd rather stay b'hefkers. Kamash lon hacha the gabe ovid lechavim katan lo yamrin hachi. You don't say that a little guy who was not toim tamchet, he doesn't have this preference to remain b'hefkers. Dan the middle of the nichale b'hefker is gadol shegadol b'midas hefkers. He grew up with this free attitude. The time like time of the Yisura. And he already tasted tamisha. But a katan does not have that. And for a katan, it's better for him if the katan, it's better for the katan to become Jewish. Toshis has a very important point. And let's see Toshis. Frag Toshis. Napil knows how that's best in Mishum D'Schusu V'Tema. Does the Chia have a mitam shlichus? Chia only works because it's like a shlichus. But you need to be able to be a bar shlichus. If given the Schusu line, since we say that this is good for him, like you're being Magbia Mitzia for your chaver, so it's good for him because he's going to now get this Mitzia. And therefore, Anan Sahadi, the Ovid L'Shliach. We have no sofek that if the person knew about it, he would have been memana his friend as a shliach. So now that he wasn't, we assume that he is because it's good for him. There's a shaila why the chutz of a person is calling something that falls into the chutz. Is it because it's an extension of the person's yad? But it's no worse than shlichus. So it works with shlichus. How could you be zoichin something for the cotton? Because it's an anan sahadi that he would want it. Well, even if he would want it, he can't be a mani or shliach. So that's question number one. If a cotton doesn't have shlichus, then the cotton doesn't have schia. So how could you be mezaka a cotton? How could you bezin be megayir a cotton? Well, and question number two is that kati oivit l'chavavu. At the time that they want to do the shlichus for him, he's not even Jewish. He's still a guy. For Armenian Hasam, the cotton, at least the also lechlal shlichus, is schia midrabanan. A cotton who will eventually come to this klal of shlichus because he's going to become an adult. There midrabanan at least there's a din of shlichus, so therefore there'll be a zikah midrabanan. But over the chavim agoy, the also lechlal shlichus, he'll never come to the klal of shlichus because he's a goy. He never comes into the klal of shlichus. Afilu zechiyah midrabanan lesta. There's no zechiyah midrabanan. So how in the world does this zechiyah work where the bezin could be mezaka him and make him into a yid? The near lariz of toshus amori dikhidish. The hachanami the zachanoi midrabanan. This zechiyah is only midrabanan. Midaraisa, this person is not considered a ger. He's considered a goy. He's only a ger midrabanan. Which might explain why Rashi uses as a litmus test what is a good litmus test. If he's a yid, umagoy b'yayin kosher. A goy who touches wine, it's not possible. It doesn't ask the wine midaraisa. It asks him midarabanan. So Rashi is saying that it's a ger midarabanan. So any isurim midarabanan that a goy does won't be relevant because midarabanan is the yid. But Tosfos takes it much further. The yain nesachav says they pour it to avoid the zara. We're talking about times yain that was touched by it. So Zakhamar Vanilla read the Hachanami the Zachanai Midrabana. It's also Midrabana because even Hasam the cotton is like Schia Midrabana. The Afal grab that Kati Avikachavim who so even though technically Midaraisa, this is still a goy. Ha'asi lechlal shlichus. We consider it that he came lechlal shlichus because since Midrabanan he's a yid, therefore we say that he's in the parsha. He will come to the parsha of shlichus when he becomes an adult. That's one Svar Toshis wants to say. Inami, keeping the Bahach Schia Nasi Yisrael, since the end result of the Schia will make him into a Yid, Havalek the Yisrael Gomerli in Zechia, we already treat him now like he's a Yisraeli in Schia. Very difficult concepts. So Toshis was saying either there's Schia Midrabanan, even though he's a guy, or maybe the Baal through the Schia will become a Yid, so he has a status of a Yid. In time of fact, how does this status of a ger midrabanan work? You're going to let this person marry a Bas Yisrael. Technically, she's marrying a Sheket, but we're letting her marry because her abundance said he's Jewish. The kedushin. The Rashi, this is a goy gomer. Yesh leimers atoyshus the kasavik ma'adamer b'icharaba. Yesh koyach b'yat chachamim laker davar min atar b'kum v'asei. The Chum have a right to say that this Jewish girl is allowed to marry this guy. So Zok Toshis, this is a bombshell chiddush. This is a bombshell chiddush that they can make a yid, a guy into a yid, and the matter a Jewish girl to marry a guy. That bomb is a chiddush. So Zok Toshis that he parach my kamash malon. When our Gemara asks my kamash malon, and the Gemara says the chiddush is that don't say that it's a choy because he wants to cares. It's really a schos. The Gemara could have said a different chiddush. The chiddush is that the Rabbanan could actually be matter a Jewish girl to marry a guy. The chiporach ma'kamash malon, the motzul l'shmi kamash malon, he is koyach biat chachamim laker davim in atayr bekum basei. The chad b'trei taminaka. That's also a chiddush. So there's really two massive chidushim in that we say that when Bezdin makes a cut into a ger, then it's a good gears.
Why would the Rabban do this? What was the trigger, or what's the catalyst? What? It's got to be a reason.
Well, you have a mother who was Megayer, and she wants to bring her children with her.
So why can't she wait until it's a guddle? I don't understand.
Maybe once he's telling him Tam Isser, he won't want to join her.
And so that means he may not want to join Midrabanan either.
So, but I could hear that if the child wants, well, the child can't express interest in being Jewish, but I can hear that if a mother wants to become Jewish and she wants to take her children along, we're going to try to help them. That makes sense. A mother wants to become Jewish, she has children.
Well, if the Deraisa doesn't want this to happen, why would the Rabbanon want it to happen? In other words, the Rebbe Shalom is a little smarter than the Rabbanon, right? And he doesn't want it to happen, and the Rabbanon want it to happen.
Why do you say he doesn't want it to happen? They say there's no mechanism of schia for a cotton, but that doesn't mean we don't want it to happen. It doesn't mean something wrong with it.
Okay, well, if the Rosh Hashanah would want it to happen, there would be a mechanism.
Well, that you could really say that by every issue of Rabbanon, or by every share of Rabbanon. If Rabbanon would have wanted it, he would have made that. You could do.
No, usually together, there's a reason, there's a trigger. There is a catalyst for it.
But why wouldn't you argue if that was a necessary, that was a trigger that justifies the kind of they're making? So why didn't Hashem build that into the Torah to begin with?
Because there were times you don't need that trigger, and there are times where the trigger wasn't relevant.
I mean, it's referring to a situation that occurred later after Matan Torah. Situation cropped up.
Always here because of a Maisa Shahaya, But here you don't have a Maisa Shahaya.
I don't know, maybe the Maisa Shahaya is that a woman wanted to become Jewish and she didn't know what to do with her kids.
Okay, it's just a little word. You're saying it's a massive
I hear
chiddush.
it's a distinction.
It's very
I hear the
unusual.
distinction that there's no real problem.
That's right. Doesn't solve a problem. It doesn't really solve a problem.
The Gemara doesn't even say a story about a woman who wants to be a guy. There's a problem with her kids.
Right.
They wouldn't take her kids. They wouldn't take her kids into the school because they were Jewish, or they couldn't become members of the Agudah because they were Jewish, and because of that, they made it become. It sounds like it's a. She's laughing because our shul is not makbid on being Jewish to be a member of the shul.
I'm glad to hear that the microphone is working in the sense that you can even hear me chuckling.
Okay, well, so that's a good point. What occurred that prompted the Chachamim to make this clear? And it's a huge chiddush because they're actually making someone who's technically a goy, they're letting a Jewish girl marry him. Okay, Gavaltik. Zog to Gemara. Lema Messiah. Let's see if we can bring a riot to Rapuna that you could be Megayer a cousin. Hagiyaris, Vashvuya. This is our very Mishnah. Hagiyaris, Vashvuya, Vashivcha, Sheniftu, Vinishenis Gayu, Vinishenis Tacharu, Pechusa is Mibinoi, Shalosh, Shanam, Vemechot. So here we have a Giyaris who became Jewish when they were less than 3 years old. My love, exactly how did this occur? That Pelinu al das bez. Maybe it's speaking where they were bez and toivelder, meaning they were mizaker with this their abundant areas. So you have a raya that you could do it. Not from a law, you don't have a raya. Hacha b'maya skidon the geshin is gairu bonav uvenois avima. This is a ger who is megayer and he took his children with him. So the father could be zoiche in the gers for the son. That's not the Durabanan. The Durabanan is only if there's no father and it's the mother that wants to do it. And the mother can't be beguile their children. Oh, so I said Amaratzis because I forgot to read the next 3 of the words of the Gemara. If it's their father doing it, then for sure it's nichel. So I was wrong. It's not because the father has a schis. So the father became a ger, then for sure it's a schus for them. But when the mother does it, lav daf. Amar B'Yosef, higdilu. Amar B'Yosef, higdilu. Once they become adults, Rashi's ketanim shenes gayu ba'afilu maviyah. Ketanim that were magayer, whether it was with Bezdin or with their father, they have the option to back out. You have the option to back out.
You guys probably don't remember this, but the Aguda had a case where a ger, he married a Jewish woman, and they were members in the Aguda for many years. And one day decided to unger himself, and
Really?
he left the fold. He probably think he married a shiksa, but his children stayed from him, and
Wow.
and they're good kids. Went to yeshivas and married
Wow.
from women.
Wow. Because we have now in the Bishmarish someone who's a ger and a balchu.
Yeah. Yes, we do. You're right. Right.
But
Are there yeshivas for that? Ger and balchus?
He says, wow. Wow. Zok Gemara, Eshe Abaye, Hagiyaris v'Ashvuya v'Ashivcha sheniftu v'shenisgayu v'shenishtachu chuzos mibinoi shalosh shalom b'yem echad. Once again, this is our Mishnah. Halach is Kesubos and Masai. Frag the Gemara, v'solka daita higdilu yichadon limchais. If you're going to tell me that when they become adults, they can walk away from it all, so what's going to happen over here? You're going to have a woman who's a giyaris that could walk away. She could technically walk away when she becomes an adult. Somebody marries her. She's 7 years old. Somebody marries her. And if he divorces her, he's going to have to give her a ksuba. And she might walk away from Yiddishkeit when she becomes a gedola. So you have vina la ksuba, the azla ba'achla b'giyusa. Is Chazal going to be misakin the ksuba for a woman who's going to end up using it as a goiter, a Jewish woman will give a ksuba. We're going to give a woman ksuba where it's possible that she'll walk away from Yiddishkeit and then she'll have all this Yiddish gel. Zok to Gemara, lichigadla. Zok to Gemara. One second. Lichigadla shirashi lo yavina lo achetagda. You're right. We do have to worry about it. Therefore, if she divorces at 7 years old, we won't make the husband give her the ksuba right then and there. We'll tell the husband that when she becomes an adult, then you have to give her the ksuba. Fact to Gemara, but lechigadla nami memachia v'nafka. When she's a gedola, she can also walk away from it all. Zok to Gemara, no. Even shegdila sha'achas v'lei michsa. When she becomes a gedola, at that point she has to make her decision: does she want to stay or not? And if at one point she says, "I want to stay," then shuv eina yechad limchos. She doesn't have the option to walk away from Yiddishkeit anytime she wants. Right when she becomes a gedola, she has to make that decision. So we'll wait till she makes the decision to remain in the fold of Yiddishkeit, and only then will they make her ex-husband pay her the ksuba. Most of Rabba also asked a kasha on this halacha from a different Mishnah, not from the same Mishnah that we just quoted, our Mishnah that Abaye asked from. Elu Nairish Yesh Lam Knas. These are the Nairish. The Mishnah tells us in Perek Elu Nairish. These are the Nairish that get a Knas, meaning if someone was ma'anis them or mafated them, they get a Knas. Who are they? Habala Mamzeres. Even the Mamzeres. Rashi says, normally the man who was ma'anis or mafata a woman has to marry her. In this case, Avada he doesn't because she's a mamzeres. He still has to pay the knas. Fala Nasina, who doesn't have the status of a Jew. Fala Kutis, Fala Gioris, Fala Shvuya, Fala Shivcha Shaniftu, Vishanisgayu, Vishanishtachu, Chuzois, Ibenoy Shalom Be'emechad. All of these women who were Nisgayer, they became full Jews before they were 3. In other words, we don't need to be concerned that they're not Basurais. We're assuming they're all Basurais. Then, Yesh Lem Knas, they get Knas. So once again, I can ask the same question. If all these girls could walk away from Yiddishkeit when they become adults, are we going to give them a Knas that they can go now use as goyim? We don't want to help non-Jewish women. Yes, if someone is mafatar or ma'anas, one of these girls, he has to give her a knas, but not right away when she becomes an adult. Correct. The Gemara, the same thing as before. When she's a gedolah, she can also walk away. So the Gemara, there's a time limit. Once she becomes a gedolah and she wants to continue with her Yiddishkeit, and she doesn't walk away from it all, so you wait till her gerus is irrevocable. You wait till she becomes a gedolah and she's there for a little while, an hour, where she had to make her decision to either remain a yid or not. And once she remains a yid, just like before we said she gets her ksuba, here too she gets her knas. So the question is, Abaya asked Akasha from ksuba, our Mishnah, and Rava asked Akasha from knas. Why did Abaya not want to ask Akasha from knas? And why did Rava not want to ask Akasha from ksuba? So Abai didn't ask the kasha from Rava's case of knas, because Hasam Kadasa, why there's not a kasha why you would even give it to a goiter. Time is shalo yehayta niska. We would cancel him. It's not a kasha to us that we would give a knas, even though she's a shiksha, because we don't want him to be a chayta niska. He didn't have there. He's ma'anis or he's mafata a girl. Let him pay. We don't care who it goes to. He has to pay. That's why he doesn't ask from the case of knas. Rava didn't ask the kasha from our Mishnah of Ksuba. Is Ksuba hanya taima shaloite kala bein of loitzia. The whole purpose of Ksuba, it's not about her, it's about him. It's to give him a disincentive to give her a get. So if that means that he has to pay her, even though she might go off to derech or decide to walk away from Yiddishkeit later, it doesn't matter. The purpose of it is shaloite kala bein of loitzia, that still exists, and therefore it wouldn't be fair that you would give them ksuba money, even though they might walk away from it all. Gewaltig. Zok the Gemara. Zok the Heilige Mishnah weiter. Hagado shabal aktana. An adult that was born aktana. The cotton shabal agdola. And the cotton, now Rashi says the bal aktana is pchusa mibas shalish she'ein biyasa biyah. So we're talking about a gdola that was born aktana, less than 3 years old, assuming he wasn't put into jail, she remains a basula. The cotton shabal agdola, or a cotton as bal agdola, and Rashi says that's referring to pachas ben teisha, so his bia is not either a bia. Umukasates, or a woman who lost her basula, and Rashi sheniska la eitz ba'isamakim, she was injured by a piece of wood that was pushed in there. Kesubos on the side. All of these women are kesubos on the side. So a gadol shabal aktana, we know, and there's no bia to a girl who's pachas mishlosh shonim. And they cut in Shabbat Doila, his bia is not a bia, so she's a basula. And Mukas Eitz is not a ba'ula either. Even though she might not have her basulam physically, nevertheless, she's considered a basula, and she gets ksuba. Rashi says, Ksubas Masayim, im nasul ish achrechem, if they got married to a man after one of these bias, or after she became a Mukas Eitz, le'avdu b'kachas ksubasa, im nasul stam, v'lai pirish lakum. If the chasmus spoke out, hey, listen, I don't want any of these things. If any of these things, I don't want you, well, then there'll be a mekachos. But stam, when somebody marries a woman, it doesn't bother him if one of these occurrences happen to her. Divrei Rabbi Meir. That's what Rabbi Meir's shita is. But the Chachamim, the Chum argue, and they say Mukas Eitz Ksubas Amana. A Mukas Eitz, her Ksuba is only Amana, not Masai. So it's just important to note that at first glance, the way we're reading the Mishnah, it seems to indicate that a Mukas Eitz is different than a cotton Shabal Agdoila. Because it seems like a Chum would agree that a cotton Shabal Agdoila, Ksuba is still Masayim. He's only arguing on the case of Mukas Eitz. And that's something that the Gemara is going to be discussing. How about Basula Almana Rusha V'Chalutzum and Nasuin? In the last Mishnah we discussed a woman who was married, but she was only Mikudeshes, so she was not even in a relationship that would lead to Bia. She only had Kedushin. There we considered her a Basula, and her Ksuba was still Masayim, and there was still a tiny Basulam on her. Here we have a Basula, I mean, she never had Bia, but she was Nesua. She already went to Chuppah. It was already mutter for this couple to do Bia, but her husband died before they had a chance to do Bia. So there we say Ksubas and Mana. There we say Ksubas Mana, meaning if she went to Chuppah and then her husband dies, the next husband who marries her only has to give her Ksubas Mana. We consider her a Ba'ula, even though she might not physically have had a Bia. And since it's not expected that their Basulois, once they have Nesuin, there's no time Basulim, and Rashi says, in Yochel Afsida Oisamana, if it turns out that she's not a Basula, he can't enter Mekachtos. Once she was a Nesua, it's accepted that she's not a Basula anymore. Hagiyoris v'ashvuya v'ashivcha sheniftu v'shenisgayu v'shenishtachu yiseres albunoi shalosh yachad. Any of these women who only became a giyoris after they were 3, meaning they might be ba'ulois from before they became. Allah is ksubas and mana beilam tanis basulim. Once again, we don't consider them to be basulim. Amar Yehuda Amarav, Kadon habal agdoila asa mukaseitz. A cotton who's ba on the agdoila asa mukaseitz. So right off the bat, this doesn't really stem with our Mishnah, because our Mishnah said that cotton habal agdoila, it seemed like everybody agreed she has the status of a basula, and the machlokes between Ber and the Chachamim was only by mukaseitz. So that is what the Gemara is going to deal with, how Rabbi Yehuda Marav's halacha stems with our Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav, cotton habal agdoila asa mukaseitz. When I said this halacha in front of Shmuel, Amar, Shmuel said, Ein mukaseitz bebasar. A piece of wood would make a woman a mukaseitz and make her into a ba'ula. But basar, meaning the aver of a small child, that could never make a mukaseitz. And therefore, if she's not considered a ba'ula la halacha, because we say the bia of a cotton is not a bia, she's considered then a basula. There are those who are goyers this shaila that it wasn't a bidu marav, it was Rab directly. Cotton abalak daila, Rab Amar also mukasates, Ushmul Amar ain mukasates bebasar. Flesh cannot make mukasates, only wood, only a foreign material could make mukasates. Maser Rabbi had a kasha from our own Mishnah. Gadol Shabalak Tan. Our Mishnah says a Gadol that was born a woman who's Pachash Mishloisha Shanim, or Vakatna Balak Doila, which is what we're going to focus on. That's our question here. A Katna was Balak Doila, so he's Pachash Mishloisha Shanim, and Mukasates, Ksubasa Masayim Divrei Reb Meir. Reb Meir said the Ksubas Masayim, they all have a status of a Basula. The Chachamim say, Mukasates Ksubasa Mana. So you clearly see from our Mishnah that everybody agrees that Katan Shabalak Tana is not a Mukasates and gets Ksubas Masayim. The Chachamim are only arguing by an actual Mukasates. So this is Shver on Rav. Amarav Hachik Amar Gadol Balak Tana V'loy Klum. A Gadol comes on the Tana if the girl is less than 3 years old. That's V'loy Klum. She's for sure considered a bisula. The Pachash Mikan Kinegeya Kinoisen Etzabayim Dummy. Since this girl was less than 3 years old, it's not a bia at all. She's a complete basula. That's the first case of the Mishnah. Now the second case of the Mishnah. The Katna Balak Doila also Mukasates. The Katna was Balak Doila, it's like a Chasur Mechshor Shtichel, is considered a Mukasates. Mukasates Gufa plucked the Reb Meir Rabbanon. And Mukasates is a machlokes between Reb Meir and the Rabbanon. So let's go back to our Mishnah and see how we read it, because now we have a whole new approach to our Mishnah. So we have the case of Katan Shabalak Tana. Okay, the Katan Shabalak Doila has the status of a Mukasates. Who Mukasates to Basa Messiah be Reb Meir. Reb Meir holds Sai Mukasates and Sai Katan Shabalak Doila is going to be considered a basula, and it's to Basa Messiah. Reb Meir. Mukasates and as well as Katan Shabalak Doila is Ksubasa Mana. So we actually have a machlokes. We actually have a machlokes of what the ksuba is, but everybody agrees that the bia of a ketana is considered a mukasates, and that's how Rab would have to learn this Gemara. Gewaltig. Zog to Gemara weiter. I'm sorry. Correct. Zog to Gemara weiter. Omar Rabbi Bacham. Now Rabbi Chum said another hello. Machlokes b'shehikra. This whole machlokes between Reb Meir and the Rabbanon, if a mukasates or if a bia of a cotton makes her into a beula or not, and therefore it's a shaila if she gets a mona for a ksuba or messiah for a ksuba, that's only kishehikra. That's when the chassan knows about it. So there's no option to tie the mekach tais. Reb Meir medamal al boigris. Reb Meir says this is like a boigris who we consider a basula, a boigris who gets married even though she lost some of her basulim. Nevertheless, a boigris still gets ksuba masayim. So therefore, who adin a mukasates, who adin the bia of a katan and a gdoila, they're all considered basula. It's just like a boigris is, and therefore they get ksuba of masayim. Rabban medamal al bula. But the Rabbanon say only a mana. We consider her bula. But if the chassan didn't know about this, everybody agrees there's no ksuba at all because it's a mekatois. He did it. If he would have known that she was a mukasates, if she would have known that she was nevelas by a cotton, he wouldn't have wanted her at all, and therefore it's a mekatois. Okay, that's what Rabbi Bachama said. So now we're going to analyze what he said. Reb Meir and my medamel alabayis. Rabbi Bachama said that Reb Meir compares a mukasates and the bia of a cotton to a boigris that still gets masayim. Nidami lebeula. Why don't we compare them to a beula? The fact is there was a bia, something went into her body. So tomorrow beula is avid lebamaisa. b'dei adam, by a beula, an adult male did a mice on her. That's why she only gets ksuba of a mana. This woman who was nevelos by a cotton or by a mukas eitz, lo yisavad b'maisa b'dei adam. There wasn't a maisa from a human done on her, and therefore she retains her status of a basula, and therefore she still gets ksuba of masai. For Rabbanon, why are you comparing the mukas eitz to a beula, nidami leboigris, and let her get ksuba as masayim? So tomorrow, boigris lo yisavad b'maisa klal. A boigris, nothing touched her. There was no bia, there was no penetration whatsoever. That's why a boigris gets ksubas masai. This woman who's either a mukas eitz or this woman who was novellas by a cotton is avid b'maisa. There was a maisa done on her, and since there was a maisa done on her, I consider her a beula, and she no longer gets ksubas masai. Now we're going to analyze what Rami Bar Chama said. But if the husband didn't know about this, then even though Reb Meir considers her a basula, a mukas is a basula and gets ksubas masayim, but if the husband didn't know about it and didn't accept it, that's a meklach tos. Moshe Reb Nachman, correct Reb Nachman on Moyer de Kasha on Rami Bar Chama's Allah. He aimeris mukas eitzani. He claimed that she was a beula. There was a tiniest basulim over here. The Mishnah says this later on. She said I was a mukas eitz, but who oimer, and he says loy. He Eladru says ishat. You were mezana. You are not a basula. You're a beula. So what's the halacha? Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Lezer, oimer that meant that she's believed. So l'may nafkamina that she's believed. Why would she be believed? She believed the Gabi what? She's believed obviously that she gets a ksuba. If you hold loy hikrba, if he didn't know about it, even the mukas eitz, it's a mekach tos. So why isn't this a mekach tos? You see, clearly he found out about this afterwards. He didn't know she was a mukas eitz, and she's the man, whatever she's the man is for. But clearly it's not going to be a mekach tos. It seems like she'll get a ksuba mother. So it's very straight. You have a right from here. It's not a mekach tos. So Rava argues on Rami Bar Chama. And he says, "Vein hikrba, uvein lo hikrba." It doesn't make a difference if he knew about it or if he didn't. L'Rab Meir Masayim. Rab Meir would hold it would be Masayim. So now it makes sense why it's the menace, because it's a case of lo hikrba. In the ratio of Mishnah, it's lo hikrba. Turns out she was a mukas eitz. He still has to give her ksubas Masayim. We consider her a basula. And according to Rabbanan, who said mana hikrba mana, if he knew about it and he accepted. So the marriage is not a mekach tos, but she's still not considered a basula, and therefore he only gives her tshuva mana. Lo yikriba, but if he didn't recognize it at all, wasn't known before, wasn't declared, lo klum, it's a mekach tos. So Rabbi says, I disagree with you, Rami Bar Chama, that everybody holds lo yikriba is a mekach tos. Rabbi Meir holds lo yikriba is not a mekach tos. The Rabbanan I'll be made to hold that lo yikriba would be a mekach tos. And Rabbi was chayja from this. Rabbi was even chayja from this, that it's not a mekach tos at all. The Tanya, Keter Isha Shemra. What is the case of Mochi Shemra that the Torah discusses? Bala Bezdin, someone came to Bezdin, V'amar, and he said, Ploini, referring to his father-in-law, Mr. Shver, Leimatzasi Levitcha Basulam. I didn't find the sulam by your daughter. Im yesh edim shezin setachta. If there's edim that she was mizana, then yesh la ksuba mana. Then she gets a ksuba of a mana. Frank the Gemara, if she was mizana, she gets ksuba of a mana. Im yesh edim shezin setachta. Baskilahi, she gets killed. She doesn't get ksuba. She gets killed. So what does the Mishnah mean? Hachi kamar. This is what the Mishnah means. Im yesh edim shezin setachta. Of course, baskila. But zinsa meikara. But if we find out that she was mizana before her husband was makadosh her, so now there's no chiyuv misa here at all. The problem is she passed herself off as a basula, and now it's discovered that she's a beula. Yesh la ksuba mana, she gets a ksuba that's a mana. And Reb Chia bar Avin said the name of Reb Sheshes that you can extract the following information from what we just said. Zoy Semeres, Kanto Becheskes Basula, when Nimtis Bula, Yesh Loksu Bamana. The fact that even if he expected that he was marrying a basula, and then he finds that she's a ba'ula, and she said, "Yeah, I am a ba'ula, but I was a ba'ula before you married me." That's on the mekach. She still gets a ksuba mana. So you have a rai from here that loy hikirba, it's not a mekach. But it goes further. Umazav Rab Nachman. Rab Nachman asked the kash on this Mishnah that we just quoted. Hanoi says each of a if a man married a woman, and it turned out she was not a basula, she claims Mishayras Tani Nanasti in this Tabchasadeyu. Yes, I'm not a basula. I was raped. I'm not us. It's not my fault. It's tough luck for you that your wife got raped. Who I married is likey. You were already a ba'ula before I married you, before I made kedushin, by a mekach. And it's a mekach. I want out of the deal because I was under the impression that you were a basula when I made kedushin. But less laklal, and therefore you shouldn't be entitled to any ksuba at all. So it seems to say from this price we just quoted that if he married her b'teres basula, and it turns out that she was a ba'ula, it's a mekach tos. Yet the brisa we quoted earlier, the Mishnah we quoted, is yesh l'ksuba mana. So what is it? V'amalu Rab Chiya bar Avin, and Rab Chiya bar Avin said, "After Rab Aramam v'chol gedoyla adar Yosvi kamer Rab Sheishes l'shmaitza v'koshalu." They must have heard when Rab Sheishes said that if it was in some ikara, yesh l'ksuba mana. They heard that, and they must have had a kasha from this brisa that says less laklal. V'shani, so they must have explained my mekachtos nami mi masayim alvo mana isla. They must have touched it that it's a mekachtos mi masayim, and she gets a mana. So they must have touched the second brisa of loiki achalo yerstayach by a mekachtos v'lesla. It's not v'lesla klal. They must have said that v'lesla masayim elamana. So it's not a mekachtos, and she doesn't get a ksuba at all. Rather, we say she turned out being a ba'ula, and he thought it was a ba'ula. She only gets the ksuba of a mana. That's what they must have said. The adam with less laklal, and you're going to say that it's a mekach. And Rava commented on this conversation. Rava, man the kamoisiv, shaper kamoisiv. Whoever is asking the kasha is asking a good kasha because the mekach is lagamri mashma. When it says over here mekach he thought he was marrying a basula, and he really married a ba'ula. That's a mekach. That's what it means. It means it's a mekach in Gansen, and there's no ksuba at all. Vela kasha, so come to chois. So right off the bat, you see that Rava holds. Right off the bat, you see that Rava holds that even according to the Rabbanon, she obviously does get a ksuba. So Zok to Gemara, so Vela kasha hach. We still have a steer over here because one brayta says that it's a mekach and gansen, and the other brayta says it's a mana. So to Gemara, tritz ve'emahachi. This is how you have to explain. Im yesh edim she's in tzatachtav b'skila. If in the case of Moshe Shemer with an edim that she was in tzatachtav, she gets skila. Zinta kara. If she was mezana before she got married, it's a mekach tois v'loy klum. Nimtus mukas eitz, then yesh laksuba mana. So you have to add to the previous Mishnah. If she was married, the Torah she was a psula, and it turns out she was a ba'ula, that's a mekach tos and ganzen. Everybody agrees to that. But there's a third case that gets a reingemish here in the Mishnah. And the third case is if it turns out that she was a mukaseitz. So there we say yesh laksuba mana, which means that it's not a mekach tos. Correct? The Gemara by Rava who the amal rabbanon la yikabah v'loiklum. Didn't Rava say, according to the rabbanon, that if he didn't know that she was a mukaseitz, and it turns out that she was a mukaseitz, we say it's a mekach tos. Yet the way Rava is explaining this Mishnah over here, he's saying that a mukaseitz still gets ksuba mana. You have a right that when Rava said according to the rabbanon, it would be a mekach tos. You have a right that Rava was choizer from that halacha. Let's see the last Rashi. Nimtis lo hikaba. The commentary nimtis means it was found out afterwards, which means lo hikaba. He didn't know when he married her that she was a mukaseitz. Lo hikaba mashma. The commentary to Rava, and Rava said yesh l'ksuba mana. If we find out after the marriage, in fact, that she was a mukaseitz, she's still entitled to ksuba mana, meaning it's not a mekach tos. Alma, you see from Rava's answer over here that Hadr Bey Mahida La'il, must have been chayzer from what we quoted him as saying earlier, where he said earlier, according to the Rabbanon, it would be a mekach toys. The iu amar the Rabbanon v'lo klum. He said that according to the Rabbanon, earlier, Rava said according to the Rabbanon it would be a mekach toys by a mukha saints. She wouldn't get any ksuba at all. And over here, according to the Rabbanon, we want to say that she gets a ksuba mana. Maybe it's going according to Reb Meir, who holds it's not a mekach toys. Reb Meir nami lo sukma. You wouldn't be able to tell this Mishnah Ayin like Reb Meir. Reb Meir Masayim Komer. Reb Meir says if she's a mukha saint, she gets ksuba Masayim. So if Rav is learning the Mishnah is that the mukha saint is getting a ksuba of a mana, it must be that's going according to the Rabbanon. It must be that according to the Rabbanon, it would not be a mekach tos if it turns out that she was a mukha saint. How do they Rav Meyahi? So halacha l'maisa, even if it's loy hikra by a mukha saint or by the bia of a cotton less than 9 years old, the kedushin is not bottle. It's not considered a mekach toyis. There's merely a machlokes between Reb Meir and the Rabbanon if she gets ksuba masayim because she's considered a basula, or if she only gets ksuba mana because she's considered a ba'ula. But it's for sure not a mekach toyis. We'll stop here. Have a wonderful day, an easy kindness. Yes, I did. Thank you very much. I was just driving